Beneath the shadowy Spanish moss of St. Philip's Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia, lie 8 graves that the city's elite families kept shrouded in silence. Each tombstone marks the resting place of a prosperous plantation magnate who perished between 1846 and 1850, all in eerily identical ways, abrupt immobility leading to what doctors then termed a compassionate passing. Yet in 1918, during a cemetery restoration, workers unearthed a chilling secret that local leaders swiftly commanded to be hidden from history. Within each of those 8 caskets, the inner surfaces showed frantic gouges from fingernails, and the remains were twisted in poses of raw desperation. What emerged next would torment Savannah's aristocracy for decades. A bound diary concealed under the cemetery's ancient live oak, penned in the precise script of a man named Elijah Thorne, chronicling 3 years of deliberate retribution that started with a household's cries and culminated in 8 men entombed while still breathing. Imagine uncovering a tale so dark it shakes the foundations of American history, a story of unimaginable loss, masterful deception, and a revenge that turned healing hands into instruments of terror. If you're drawn to the hidden horrors of our nation's past, where justice takes twisted forms, stay with me as we delve into the shadows of the antebellum South. This isn't just a legend, it's a reminder that the oppressed can rewrite their fate in the most haunting ways. The diary's opening passage, dated April 22, 1846, opened with a solitary sentence that unlocked the mystery. Today, I witnessed my wife and children vanish into flames of despair, and I stood powerless against it. Savannah in the 1840s gleamed as the pinnacle of Southern elegance, where grand antebellum homes overlooked the Ogeechee River and empires forged from indigo and tobacco-forged lineages that deemed themselves invincible. The city's healing circles, though intimate, held immense sway among the affluent, who sought exclusive healers for their escalating woes, enigmatic chills, abrupt frailty, and odd, immobilizing afflictions that struck Savannah's foremost clans with startling frequency. Dr. Elias Whitaker had founded his clinic on Broughton Street in 1840, swiftly gaining acclaim among Savannah's high society for his pioneering cures and profound grasp of rare elixirs. His prosperity owed much to his remarkable aide, a slave called Elijah Thorne, who wielded an almost otherworldly command of curative herbs and chemical mixtures. Elijah had been acquired expressly for Dr. Whitaker's clinic after showcasing extraordinary talents in herbal remedies. Talents inherited across eras from his kin, who had acted as menders on diverse estates along the Georgia coast. Elijah Thorne stood apart from the usual labor slaves dotting Savannah's fields. Towering with perceptive gaze that seemed to inventory his environment, he had been schooled beside his prior owner's offspring, mastering literacy before such teachings were outright banned. His familiarity with Greek medical phrases even awed Dr. Whitaker, who grew dependent on Elijah's skill in crafting intricate blends and aiding intricate operations. The prosperous clients frequenting Whitaker's clinic warmed to Elijah's attendance, frequently asking for him by name due to his soothing presence and apparent innate insight into their maladies. But Elijah's existence hadn't always been limited to the pristine confines of a healing clinic. For 28 years prior to joining Dr. Whitaker, he had dwelled on the Harrington estate 12 miles beyond Savannah, where he wed a woman named Lydia and nurtured 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter, in one of the estate's humble dwellings. The Harringtons permitted this setup because Elijah's mending prowess was priceless amid the recurrent surges of illness and plague that could wipe out an estate's laborers in a single night. Elijah's know-how had preserved innumerable souls, enslaved and free alike, garnering him an uncommon esteem for his station. He had devised remedies for ailments ranging from insect stings to wasting diseases, blending ancestral African cures from his forebears with fresh approaches gleaned from scrutinizing the occasional white healers visiting the estate. The Harringtons had even let him care for their kin during sicknesses, a rite that underscored the authentic faith they vested in his talents. Yet this fragile stability shattered suddenly in April of 1846, when Josiah Harrington's betting losses compelled him to liquidate segments of his living assets to settle his swelling debts. The transaction was to encompass Elijah's wife and offspring, who would be divided and dispatched to scattered estates across the region, a routine tactic that estate holders rationalized as fiscal imperative, but which shattered kin as thoroughly as any calamity. Elijah had implored Josiah Harrington, proposing to labor extra seasons without pay if his kin could stay united. He had even floated alternate schemes, like leasing his services to neighboring estates in harvest times to yield more revenue. But Harrington, confronting lenders insistent on prompt settlement, dismissed all pleas. The auction was set for April 21, 1846 at the Savannah Slave Exchange, and no appeal would alter it. The dawn of April 21st broke misty and oppressive, with thunderheads massing over the Altamaha River, as though the elements themselves foresaw the impending catastrophe. Elijah had passed the prior evening embracing his kin in their modest hut, etching every facet of their features, every rhythm of their breaths, aware that daybreak would usher eternal division. Lydia, his spouse of 12 years, had preserved her poise amid the crisis, channeling her strength into readying their young for the unknown ahead. 9-year-old Jacob, the oldest, had inherited Elijah's wit and wonder about realms past the estate. 7-year-old Nathan shared his father's tender spirit and innate bent for mending, often aiding Elijah in collecting healing flora from the groves encircling their lodgings. Their sons, 5-year-old Isaiah and 3-year-old Miriam, gripped their mother with primal awareness that doom loomed, though they grasped not its full magnitude. As the traffickers came to gather their mortal freight, Elijah observed in impotence as his kin were herded into a cart, with 5 other kin being rent asunder by Josiah Harrington's monetary ruin. The youth's sobs blended with their elders' frantic vows of reunion someday, vows all recognized as deceptions crafted to soften excruciating agony. But the genuine nightmare unfolded en route to Savannah's slave exchange. Midway there, a cartwheel jammed in a sodden furrow from recent rains, tipping the conveyance perilously. Amid the chaos, Lydia tumbled from the cart, bashing her skull on a jagged stone by the path. Blood surged from the gash, and Elijah, despite bound wrists, strained wildly to aid her. The traffickers, fixated solely on delivering saleable goods, rendered a verdict that would shadow Elijah eternally. Instead of pursuing aid for Lydia, they labeled her expendable and commanded the cart onward without her. Elijah howled and battled his bonds as they abandoned his wife hemorrhaging and senseless roadside. But fellow captives restrained him, knowing defiance would invite retribution for all. The torment peaked at the Savannah Slave Exchange, where Elijah was compelled to behold his offspring vended to disparate purchasers. Jacob was acquired by a tobacco grower from Augusta, who employed youth for hazardous tasks in maintaining drainage amid serpent-laden bogs. Nathan was secured by a sugarcane cultivator from the lowlands, whose notoriety for exhausting captives to demise was infamous statewide. Isaiah went to a merchant in Macon for warehouse drudgery, while Miriam, scarcely fit for toil, was sold to a household in Mobile as a domestic aid, vanishing into the expansive web of bondage linking southern hubs. Throughout, Elijah upheld a facade of surrender, aware that any outburst would worsen his plight. Inwardly, though, a core fracture occurred. The man devoted to mending, to safeguarding existence and alleviating torment, saw his cherished world razed by the indifferent savagery of those who deemed humans as assets to offload at whim. Dr. Whitaker, oblivious to Elijah's full calamity, bought him chiefly for his healing acumen, investing a steep sum reflecting Elijah's renown as a superior mender. The healer had learned of Elijah's gifts from peers who had seen his labors at the Harrington estate, and he urgently required one versed in curative blends to bolster his expanding clinic. As Elijah was escorted from the slave exchange to commence his fresh existence as Dr. Whitaker's aide, he glanced back once at the site where his kin had been dispersed. In that instant, a frigid strategic resolve anchored in his soul, a forbearance that would permit him to bide, absorb, and ultimately exact a toll equaling their offense's scale. That night, solitary in the compact chamber above Dr. Whitaker's clinic serving as his new abode, Elijah initiated entries in a bound diary he had concealed through the turmoil. His initial inscription, scribed by lamplight in the refined hand he acquired young, commenced with phrases shaping his ensuing 3 years. Today I watched my wife and children burn in the fires of separation, and I did nothing to stop it. But I'm still alive, and I remember every face, every name, every voice that mocked as my world crumbled. They think they've shattered me, but they've only schooled me in endurance. The seasons after Elijah's integration into Dr. Whitaker's clinic blurred and wrote healing routines and vigilant scrutiny. Elijah executed his roles with the steadfast proficiency he always exhibited, blending mixtures, readying care spaces, and supporting patient tending. Yet beneath this veneer of compliance, he pursued a divergent inquiry, mastering the intricacies of Savannah's healing network and the opulent clans forming Dr. Whitaker's patrons. Dr. Whitaker, a widower in his late 40s without heirs, had become profoundly reliant on Elijah's prowess. The healer battled rheumatism hindering fine tasks, and Elijah's firm grip and vast recall of curative concoctions had grown vital to the clinic. Crucially for Elijah's emerging schemes, Dr. Whitaker started permitting him autonomous handling of select patient engagements, especially chronic cases needing steady oversight and care. Savannah's affluent upper crust, habituated to premier healing services, first regarded Elijah with the standard blend of nonchalant disregard and patronizing nod typical of their dealings with adept captives. However, his evident skill and deferential bearing slowly won a trust level pivotal to his designs. Patients commenced specifying him, lauding his mild approach and seeming instinctive grasp of their ills. In this span, Elijah systematically probed the histories of each affluent clan visiting the clinic. He gleaned their commerce ties, societal links, and vitally, their roles in the bondage commerce that ravaged his kin. Via attentive eavesdropping and subtle queries among fellow captives laboring in Savannah's stately abodes, he amassed thorough dossiers on the figures implicated in or gaining from the sale scattering his offspring southward. His probe disclosed that Josiah Harrington was but a single cog in a vaster exploitation machine. The Savannah slave exchange functioned with backing and engagement from the city's esteemed denizens. Figures who graced temple councils and benevolence groups while concurrently handling humans as stock for barter and gain. These were the souls who hosted lavish soirees debating arts and wisdom, while their riches stemmed from the anguish of kin like Elijah's. Amid Dr. Whitaker's steady patrons, Elijah pinpointed 8 men with direct ties to his kin's ruin. Some had attended the sale, wagering on mortal lots with the aloof curiosity they'd afford steeds or livestock. Others had funded the bondage dealings, advancing capital to brokers expert in fracturing kin for profit peaks. A handful had bought captives from that very sale vending his offspring, fueling the regime viewing humans as expendable wares. As 1846 flowed into 1847, Elijah embarked on what he termed inwardly his schooling in refined alchemy. Dr. Whitaker's healing tomes housed myriad volumes on drug mixtures, including vivid accounts of agents inducing immobility, oblivion, or death's facade, while sparing the sufferer's awareness. These texts, authored for valid healing aims, became Elijah's primers in a syllabus of reprisal. The pivotal find appeared in a volume on Central American flora poisons, detailing a blend from a creeper thriving in the Orinoco Basin, but adapted in the conservatory of a Savannah naturalist supplying rare samples to rich hoarders. This specific poison, when aptly readied, could trigger utter bodily lockdown, while preserving the sufferer's sentience and sensation fully. The stricken would seem deceased to superficial checks, but stay wholly cognizant of environs for hours ere the poison's lethality ensued. Elijah devoted months to spotting and nurturing the flora, locating samples in the conservatory of Dr. Whitaker's associate, Professor Edmund Larkspur, who lectured natural studies at the Savannah Academy. Professor Larkspur, ignorant of Elijah's genuine botanical zeal, was thrilled to encounter a shared enthusiast and permitted Elijah to aid in tending his conservatory array. Via cautious trials on lab rodents, Elijah gauged the exact measure for desired outcomes. Insufficient yielded fleeting debility. Excess brought swift demise, but precise yielded a death mimic undetectable sans deep healing lore, while sustaining awareness long enough for burial's dread. The mental readiness for his intent perhaps demanded sterner resolve than mastering the alchemy. Elijah had to sustain his mild, aiding facade, while inwardly girding to observe men agonize in manners breaching his mending ethos. He rationalized this shift by routinely revisiting his offspring's names in his diary, recalling their doom in the indifferent callousness of the profiteers. As autumn neared in 1847, Elijah had designated his initial mark, Major Theodore Beaumont, a affluent indigo cultivator who had not merely witnessed the sale of Elijah's kin, but had brazenly quipped on the rearing promise of the youths auctioned. Beaumont endured persistent arthritis and attended Dr. Whitaker's clinic bi-weekly for palliatives, offering brief respite from his torment. The Major's routine sessions, his faith in Elijah's healing gifts, and his custom of arriving unaccompanied for care rendered him a prime debut for Elijah's meticulously schemed vendetta. Yet, Elijah compelled patience, knowing endurance and flawless enactment were key to evading doubt and assuring all eight-faced deserved reckoning. In his diary, Elijah inscribed thorough sketches of each planned sufferer, logging their ailments, care timetables, and bondage commerce rolls. These logs mimicked a healer's patient files, but they outlined a divergent care regimen, one crafted not to mend, but to guarantee 8 men tasted the same impotent dread Elijah's offspring endured when wrenched from all familiar. The metamorphosis of Elijah Thorne from mender to systematic slayer commenced with scrupulous groundwork spanning all of 1847. Every facet needed perfection, every fallback plotted, every factor governed. The targets were not lone souls, but cornerstones of Savannah society, whose demises would face review by the city's top healers and probes, by officials under fierce duress, for answers. Elijah's debut move entailed cementing himself as indispensable in Dr. Whitaker's clinic. He began dawn arrivals to prep the space, evening lingers to sort healing stocks, and showed such zeal that Dr. Whitaker increasingly deferred to his insight in healing affairs. This mounting faith would prove essential when Elijah required solo patient management, sans the healer's oversight. Refining his lockdown blend took months of prudent honing. Laboring in a modest outbuilding behind Dr. Whitaker's clinic, purportedly to brew herbal aids complementing the healer's cures, Elijah grew the venomous creeper and tested extraction ways. The method risked peril. Multiple times he inadvertently dosed himself minimally, suffering brief numbness previewing his mark's final ordeals. The blend's ultimate state was a clear, scentless fluid, mixable with other cures undetected. At right measure, effects initiated in 20 minutes, first yielding debility and confusion ascribed to the patient's ailment. Within 45 minutes, total lockdown ensued, yet the mark stayed aware, able to perceive all environs. Vital. The lockdown so absolute that respiration or heartbeat evaded detection, sans meticulous probe. To 1840s healers sans advanced tools, a blend-dosed patient seemed naturally deceased peacefully. Only one versed in the poison's traits would spot faint cues of lingering life amid total stasis. Elijah's choice of Major Theodore Beaumont as premier mark was tactical and intimate. Beaumont's bi-weekly arthritis visits yielded predictable cadence, and his haughty bearing made him especially loathsome. More key, Beaumont resided solo save for household captives cowed by him, rendering unlikely demands for prolonged vigils or thorough corpse reviews post-demise. The Major's healing record afforded Elijah ideal pretext. Beaumont bore not just arthritis but frail lungs, a state Dr. Whitaker had tracked for years. If Beaumont perished abruptly, lung collapse would seem evident cause, warranting no deeper probe or dissection. On November 8, 1847, Major Beaumont arrived for his standard session, griping that his arthritis agony had sharpened markedly past days. Dr. Whitaker was tending another, so he directed Elijah to ready Beaumont's routine cure and initiate the consult. This habitual handover granted precisely the chance Elijah awaited. As Elijah prepped the Major's remedy, he infused exact drops of his lockdown blend into the mix. Decades of healing honed his steady grasp and serene mien even under strain, skills aiding him as he traversed from mender to slayer. Beaumont, used to Elijah's cures, ingested the remedy sans query or pause. The ensuing dialogue seared into Elijah's recall eternally. As the poison activated and Beaumont weakened, Elijah sat by the Major's seat and intoned in the mild pitch he always employed with ailing. "Major Beaumont," Elijah murmured softly, "I wish you to know my name is Elijah Thorne, and you raised my kin at the slave sale on April 21st, 1846. You chuckled as my offspring were vended. You bantered on their worth as rearing assets. Recall that day?" Elijah inclined nearer, assuring Beaumont saw his visage sharply. "But true demise won't strike till hours post-burial. You'll be wholly aware as soil heaps on your casket. You'll catch every noise, feel every touch, and have ample span to ponder your deeds to my offspring. Then you'll grasp terror's essence. The lockdown now total. Beaumont seemed a cadaver, but Elijah discerned the frantic sentience in his gaze, the wild bid to signal or flee his frozen shell. Elijah assessed the major's heartbeat and breath with expert diligence, verifying both so subtle as undetectable sans special gear. When Dr. Whitaker entered the care space 10 minutes on, he found Elijah poised deferentially by what seemed Major Beaumont's remains, his mien conveying fitting worry and sorrow. "I'm sorry to report the Major has departed, Doctor," Elijah stated softly. His lungs failed amid prepping his next cure. He appeared to pass serenely. Dr. Whitaker's review affirmed Elijah's verdict. The Major evinced no vitality signs, and given his lung frailty, demise cause appeared clear. Within 45 minutes, the form was conveyed to Beaumont's residence, where interment plans befitting one of Savannah's notables were set. Elijah joined the rites, standing reverently in the captive's zone, as Major Beaumont's casket descended into earth. As initial dirt clods hit the wood top, Elijah pondered if Beaumont lingered aware, sensing his fate. The notion yielded no glee, solely a stark justice sense at last dispensed. That night, Elijah penned his diary's second note. "Major Beaumont has atoned for his sins. 7 linger. Justice endures, yet it endures assured." The seasons post Major Beaumont's entombment dragged tortuously. As Elijah awaited signs, his approach stirred suspicion. Savannah's salons hummed with anticipated sympathies and tributes to the Major's societal gifts, but no queries surfaced on his demise's details. Dr. Whitaker cited the instance to fellow healers as a case of how swiftly lung failure could fell seeming robust souls. And Elijah's repute as adept, compassionate healing aid stayed pristine. This triumphant first reprisal bolstered Elijah to advance the second stage, but it compelled him to face the mental burden of his deeds. Despite years of meticulous groundwork and utter conviction in his cause's equity, witnessing a man's terrified demise impacted him deeper than foreseen. He endured sleepless weeks after, not from remorse, but from graphic envisioning of Beaumont's final buried hours. Picking his second mark demanded prudent weighing of timing and means. Elijah needed to shun patterns risking eventual notice, meaning varied gaps between demises and seeming causes. His sleuthing tagged Magistrate Lucius Hargrove as prime second quarry, a figure who had not just eyed Elijah's kinsale, but had legally sanctioned kin divisions among captives, contending in tribunals that such tactics were vital for discipline and fiscal optimization. Magistrate Hargrove bore acute neuralgias worsening over prior 18 months, compelling him to seek Dr. Whitaker's aid ever oftener. The magistrate's ailment granted Elijah both chance and shield. Neuralgia victims occasionally endured lethal convulsions, and Hargrove's maturity made such plausible. But ere Elijah could enact his scheme on Magistrate Hargrove, an unforeseen snag arose, nearly upending his full reprisal drive. In May of 1848, Dr. Whitaker declared he mulled adding a junior associate, a youthful healer named Dr. Nathaniel Corbin, fresh from studies in Boston and keen to root in Savannah's rivalrous healing sphere. Dr. Corbin's clinic entry would mean heightened watch on Elijah's doings, more eyes on his patient dealings, and tougher covert blend dosing. Worse, Dr. Corbin trained under healers versed in nascent forensic arts, including ways to spot odd agents in departed patients. Elijah grasped he must hasten his schedule drastically. Rather than spacing victims' demises over years as schemed, he'd conclude his quest in weeks, ere Dr. Corbin's presence rendered continuity unfeasible. This timeline squeeze would demand bolder hazards and suboptimal setups for some killings. The rush spurred Elijah's initial grave error. While readying Magistrate Hargrove's cure in June 1848, Elijah inadvertently overdosed his lockdown blend slightly. The magistrate's seeming demise hastened unexpectedly, and the lockdown's totality was so utter that even Dr. Whitaker spotted anomalies in the form's state. "Peculiar," Dr. Whitaker whispered, inspecting Magistrate Hargrove's cadaver. "The fiber stiffness exceeds typical for convulsion victims. And note his gaze. There's an almost frantic cast to it." Elijah's pulse thundered as he observed Dr. Whitaker's deeper probe than on Major Beaumont. For agonizing moments, Elijah dreaded his scheme's full exposure. But Dr. Whitaker's era's training, solid yet lacking precise poison lore, missed spotting Elijah's rare toxins marks. After 20 minutes scrutiny, The healer deemed the odd traits mere outcomes of Hargrove's severe convulsion. Wretched soul must have agonized fiercely in his end, Dr. Whitaker noted, unwittingly narrating Hargrove's ongoing ordeal, immobilized but sentient as his form readied for entombment. Magistrate Hargrove's rites drew more luminaries than Major Beaumont's, suiting a 25-year servant of Savannah's jurisprudence. Elijah watched from captives area as the magistrate's casket sank into St. Philip's, mere 2 plots from Beaumont's rest. As rites wrapped, Elijah spied something chilling his veins. A youth at crowd's rear, jotting meticulously in a slim-bound book. The scribe was Samuel Whitaker, no kin to the doctor, a reporter for the Savannah Gazette, privately probing what he dubbed the notable passings anomaly, a chain of abrupt fatalities amid the city's upper echelons seeming improbably clustered. Whitaker had observed that in recent 4 months, Savannah mourned multiple rich citizens to sudden healing crises, all explainable singly, but dubious collectively. Elijah's diary note that Eve mirrored his rising sense that time waned. Magistrate Hargrove joins Major Beaumont in tasting true equity. But I suspect patterns emerge that could imperil my quest's finish. I must hasten, even embracing heightened perils. Elijah's hastened cadence meant his third mark needed elimination in days, not months. He chose Commodore Henry Caldwell, a vessel proprietor who ferried captives from Savannah to southern Marts and who oversaw mortal loads with the precision he lent prized tobacco hauls. Commodore Caldwell posed distinct hurdles as quarry. Unlike prior marks routinely visiting Dr. Whitaker for ongoing ills, Caldwell was hale, seeking aid only for trivial sea wounds. Elijah would craft a chance, rather than await one. The fix came via Elijah's web among Savannah's captive circles. Pantry captives in Battery's opulent homes oft harvested masters' doings and disseminated to other household captives. Through these shadow networks, Elijah learned Commodore Caldwell planned a banquet for key Savannah shipping tycoons on July 12, 1848. The banquet would afford Elijah ideal to fell his third while scouting future quarries. Banquet staff oft borrowed inter-households, and Elijah had bonds with multiple captives in meal prep. With astute plotting, he could join serving, gaining direct Caldwell and guests access. But as Elijah honed banquet schemes, Samuel Whitaker pursued his probe into Savannah's recent elite demise string. The reporter frequented St. Philip's Cemetery, mapping fresh entombments and logging departed's healing pasts. His finds soon menaced all Elijah built. The dusk of July 12, 1848 signaled Elijah Thorne's systematic reprisals' twilight. The banquet at Commodore Caldwell's estate on Bay Street assembled 10 of Savannah's prime maritime barons, yielding unmatched chance to survey multiple quarries while felling his chief. Elijah arranged involvement via Esther, a veteran captive overseeing kitchen for many Savannah galas. Esther, blind to Elijah's aims, welcomed his serving aid offer, as several aides succumbed to a contagion rife in the old town's captive huts. The Commodore's hall shimmered with glass and sterling as Savannah's sea trade moguls convened to debate route growths and bondage transport's rising yields. Elijah glided unseen, replenishing goblets and removing dishes while absorbing talks exposing the raw brutality propping Savannah's wealth. Commodore Caldwell, a sturdy mid-40s man with silvered locks and calloused palms echoing sea decades, presided table's end, enthralling guests with lucrative sail tales and tactics maximizing captive shipment value. His in-depth know-how on quelling captive uprisings mid-voyage and sustaining mortal freight alive long hauls made him acutely odious to Elijah. As dusk deepened, Elijah marked several others' bondage trade rolls, flagging them future quarries. Overheard dialogues unveiled a complicity web far past lone traders at his kin's sale. These souls debated humans with detached zeal, akin to tobacco rates or sale plans, deeming kinriffs business tolls. Elijah's window came serving the closing dish, a ornate sweet needing per-guest crafting. In Caldwell's kitchen, Elijah precisely infused his lockdown blend into the Commodore's rum-drenched pudding, via honed months' trials. The poison soaked into the spirit-laden sweet veiling taste while assuring swift uptake. Commodore Caldwell savored his sweet with evident relish, praising Esther's mastery and seeking her formula for his chef. In 25 minutes, initial effects hit. Mild vertigo he blamed on night spirits and room stuffiness. As lockdown advanced, Commodore Caldwell withdrew from table, citing air need to steady his mind. Elijah, doorway watching from kitchen, saw the Commodore reach his study, slumping into favored armchair as Blend peaked. Caldwell's demise discovery 15 minutes on sparked the scrutiny Elijah sought to dodge. Rather than quiet clinic exit, the Commodore perished before 10 eyes demanding swift answers. Dr. Josiah Langford, a banquet attendee, probed the form as others watched alarmed. "This baffles," Dr. Langford declared post-initial check. "Commodore Caldwell seems seizure-struck, yet no clear apoplexy or lung signs. The fiber tautness is stark, nearly poison-like." Poison's utterance rippled shock through guests, birthing the attention Elijah evaded. In 45 minutes, 2 more healers arrived to review Caldwell's form, and by dawn, dubious demise news permeated Savannah salons. Samuel Whitaker, tracking the demise chain, reached Caldwell's estate pre-light, querying staff and guests while recollections freshened. His probe disclosed Elijah's banquet presence, first linking one soul to multiple recent elite demises. The snare tightened on Elijah, but his quest lingered unfinished. 5 intended quarries breathed, and rising watch made standard felling improbable. Despair and waning time drove Elijah to his riskiest call. He'd try multi-quarry strikes at once, via a way assuring peak dread, even risking near-certain seizure. Elijah's sleuthing flagged a covert assembly on August 10, 1848, where 5 of Savannah's top bondage brokers would convene at Markham & Partners' offices to seal packs for major ops growth. The dusk assembly post hours afforded Elijah a chance to ensnare all 5 confined. His devised scheme was clever and appalling in ease. Night laboring over 10 days, Elijah used clinic access to brew bulk concentrated lockdown blend. Rather than single dosing, he'd aerate it via the edifice's glow system lighting the office. Markham & Partners used central glow feed to room lamps. By injecting concentrate into main feed, Elijah ensured all inside lethal exposure minutes post-evening assembly lamps ignition. On August 10th dusk, Elijah stationed alley rear of Markham & Partners, awaiting 5's arrival for secret assembly. At precise 7:30, office panes glowed with lamplight, signaling assembly start and Elijah's snare trigger. In 25 minutes, the structure hushed. Elijah lingered another 45 minutes, assuring full lockdown air using pilfered duplicate key, via astute plot, to rear-enter. The conference chamber scene was ghastly and gratifying. 5 men ringed an oak board, forms rigid in seizure poses. Their gazes, sole mobile parts, trailed Elijah room-circuiting, betraying trapped terror and sentience in frozen shells. Elijah neared each singly, intoning the serene expert pitch of prior quarries. He self-identified and detailed their plight, clinically outlining burial awareness and ensuing hours asphyxiation. Their ocular expressions, panic, denial, frantic pleas, yielded Elijah satisfaction unforesighted by years' schemes. But Elijah's victory fleeting. As he prepped exit, letting mourn discovery, corridor footfalls echoed. Another lingered in edifice, unplanned per Elijah's watch. The portal swung, revealing Samuel Whitaker, probing Savannah's dubious demise chain. Whitaker trailed clues to tonight's assembly as probe crux, arriving timely to eye Elijah over 5 seeming cadavers. "So it's fact," Whitaker uttered softly, voice mingling dread and triumph. "Systematic slaying of Savannah's elite, and you're culprit." Elijah grasped his schemes fully frayed, no excusing his chamber presence or 5's convenient demise. The reporter's probe mirrored soon authorities' verdict. One with healing lore and quarry schedules access waged methodical slaying drive. "They demolished my kin," Elijah stated plainly, shunning denial. "They vended my offspring as beasts, and roadside abandoned my wife dying. This equity, not slaying." Whitaker's reply unveiled Savannah's racial intricacies, even amid evident offense. As reporter, he owed truth exposure on slayings. As Southerner, he grasped bondage brutality fueling Elijah's reprisal. This clash birthed hesitation shaping both destinies. "Those men there," Whitaker gestured at locked-down quarries. "They linger alive, yes? Hence gaze motion. You've induced death mimic with sentience intact." Elijah affirmed, seeing denial futile. "They'll taste my offspring's dread when wrenched from known. They'll span hours pondering deeds, as my kin pondered wagon fates to exchange." The ensuing dialogue was logged in Whitaker's diary, unearthed eras later in his old home's overhaul. The reporter grappled duty to unmask mass slayer versus empathy for injustices birthing that slayer. I can't permit continuance, Whitaker concluded, but nor ignore your drive. Those men fueled a regime treating humans as chattel. They gained from kin fractures and youth sales. In fair realms, they'd face repercussions. Elijah's reply unveiled the ethos sustaining his 3 years' schemes and acts. In fair realms, my kin's ruin never occurs. Since equity denied legally, I forged mine via their regime's taught lore. The Elijah Whitaker impasse broke on external voices nearing edifice. Others approached to check assembly, perhaps expected or spotting odd activity. Both sensed minutes till scene exposure and Elijah's doom seal. Rear steps exist, Whitaker murmured. You might flee yet. I could stall report hours, granting rural reach. But Elijah embraced quest end via seizure or demise. 8 men wrecked his kin, and he'd felled but 5. The leftover 3 would thrive on crimes, and crime-birthing regime persist unaltered. I'm not fleeing, Elijah stated with steadfast serenity marking his deeds. Let them arrive. Let them unearth my works. Perhaps stories spread sparks understanding that captives too bear endurance bounds silently. The external voices amplified, with multi-footfalls on edifice front steps. Whitaker chose haunting lifelong, safeguard his tale over Elijah. The reporter positioned to watch and log ensuing, assuring full account of Elijah's seizure and quarry's find. When Savannah's watchmen stormed conference chamber, they met baffling vista. 5 notables board-ringed motionless, seeming deceased sans natural demise marks. Standing serene by board was a captive shunning flight or fight, instead proffering full admission of deeds and method details. Elijah's admission, scribed by lead watchman and archived in Savannah's offense logs, granted officials data solving not just Dusk's multi-demises, but baffling fatalities puzzling city's healers near 18 months. The lockdown blend, dosing ways, quarry picks via bondage ties, all logged with precision mirroring Elijah's reprisal drive. Elijah Thorne's hearing became antebellum Savannah's most debated legal affair, not for guilt doubt, but moral queries on bondage, equity, and captive endurance bounds. Prosecution, helmed by prosecutor Edmund Duval, framed as plain slaying. Captive killing 8 notables, needing execution for order upkeep. Defense, court named and led by hesitant counsel Theodore Bancroft, faced near impossible. Defend confessing multi-slayer while contending slayings justified by kin's systematic ruin. Bancroft's tactics shunned guilt denial, instead unveiling bondage brutality birthing such dire reprisal. The hearing exposed Savannah bondage trade details veiled publicly. Accounts on kin division tactics, exchange cruelties, and captives' utter legal impotence mirrored uncomfortably a society favoring bondage as kindly set up. Elijah's vivid account of kin ruin sans intervention compelled Savannah's elite to face their economy's human tolls. Samuel Whitaker's Savannah Gazette trial report stirred Southern sensation. His pieces, with vast Elijah diary excerpts and blend details, reprinted from Carolina to Texas. The tale of captive turning healing lore to reprisal tool became fixation and dread for regional bondage holders. Elijah's offense's healing facets drew keen scientific scrutiny. Dr. Whitaker, shattered learning his faith aid used clinic as slaying hub, testified deeply on Elijah's drug lore and rare blend access. Revelation captives could hold advanced alchemy, and poison insight defied intellect assumptions on them, sparking debates on captive education wisdom. The 5 blend locked at Markham and Partners gave trial's starkest accounts. All endured, though ordeal's dread varied by post-seeming demise awareness span. Their narratives of paralyzed sentience, hearing demise calls, right plans discussed, birthed visceral grasp of Elijah's reprisal beyond legal debates. Colonel Everett Sloan, a endurer, detailed his mental torment. I perceived all, sensed all, but couldn't twitch a lash. When my spouse mourned over me, I yearned to soothe her, signal life. But I was caged in my cadaver, helpless utterly, as burial preps advanced. If Elijah Thorne aimed to teach terror, he excelled profoundly. Revelation that 2 prior quarries, Major Beaumont and Magistrate Hargrove, were entombed sentient sparked outcry beyond Savannah. Southern kin queried if kin demise is natural or akin poisonings. Exhumation and post-demise probe demands swamped Savannah healers, birthing suspicion climate enduring years. Elijah stayed poised and eloquent through affairs, unrepentant for deeds, regretting solely unfinished quest on all 8 quarries. His court finale summed chillingly motives and means. I trained to guard life, ease woe. But when society raised my kin calling it lawful, I learned mending lore doubles for equity assurance. I seek no clemency, as none graced my wife and offspring. I ask merely that condemning me, recall I birthed not the regime necessitating such reprisal. Jury's counsel spanned under 45 minutes. Elijah Thorne guilty all counts, hanged doomed. Unsurprising given offenses scale and slave society order needs. Yet swift verdict settled not moral queries on bondage, equity, captive humanity. Elijah hanged October 22, 1848, pre-1 I-500+ crowd, witnessing Savannah's infamous offender's end. His gallows finale, scribed by Samuel Whitaker and Southern papers published, I perish knowing 8 men tasted my offspring's dread when sold from loves. That makes my end worthy. But kin ruin regime persists. Other kin suffer minds. When so, recall even patient test bears silent endurance limits. Elijah's remains unmarked graved beyond Savannah bounds per laws barring executed interment in hallowed soil. But his diary, trial seized as proof, never authority returned post-affairs. Samuel Whitaker, diary examining for trial reports, copied contents vastly ere clerk return. Years on, memoir prepping Whitaker buried Elijah's diary under St. Philip's Oak, near slain men's plots. Whitaker's 1884 account explained, I couldn't raise such reprisal record, nor let it spur akin acts. Perhaps future eras with shifted equity, bondage views better grasp dire need driving Elijah Thorne Mender and Slayer both. Elijah's 1918 diary find during cemetery overhaul revealing 8 caskets' inner gouges, affirmed legend as fact. The marks, fingernail desperations on wood, proved Whitaker's account precise. Savannah governance swiftly deemed find delicate history, sealing case records. Official rationale, public safety, racial strain risks, but many saw shielding notable kin whose forebears bondage engaged or profited. Elijah Thorne's reprisal legacy stretched past Savannah. Antebellum South bondage holders grew wary educated captives, especially medical or drug access ones. Fresh edicts curbed captives' book, healing train, science access as officials saw education turned oppressed to peril foes. Case spurred U.S. forensic healing growth. Elijah's rare lockdown blend prompted odd poison detection research in Departed, yielding post-demise probe advances aiding future offense probes. But deepest Elijah tale impact, national bondage debate sway. Revelation seemingly meek, loyal captives might harbor rage years challenged institutions' stability, moral base assumptions. If Elijah Thorne, learned, adept, master trusted, could scheme, enact such reprisal, what of millions other Southern captives' true sentiments? This enigma teaches even American history's bleakest. Lone resistance acts could quake seemingly firm regimes. Elijah Thorne's tale recalls justice deferred isn't always denied. Sometimes it morphs dire. What do you think? Were Elijah's actions a justified response to his family's devastation? Or did his vengeance become its own darkness? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's discuss this eerie chapter from our shared past. If these untold stories of resilience and retribution captivate you, subscribe for more dives into America's forgotten shadows, turn on notifications, and share with a fellow history enthusiast. Remember, the echoes of yesterday still whisper warnings for today. Keep listening.